I was fast asleep in my lakeside cabin when I was jolted awake by aggressive knocking at my door. Police officers, past midnight. Turns out, the chaos was sparked by a frantic 911 call from none other than a woman I now know as Ho Karen. She had reported a break-in into my own home. She stood there in the dark, absolutely convinced she'd just busted a criminal. But the moment I calmly confirmed my identity and proved that I was the owner of the property, her smug expression drained away. She froze. You could see the realization hit her like a freight train. Her entire body went rigid as she couldn't even blink. That was the moment she realized she had seriously underestimated who she was dealing with. Trust me, the way everything unfolded from the reveal to the well-deserved consequences will keep you watching till the end. But first, let me take you back to the beginning. Just 3 months earlier, I had moved into a quiet community called Lakeshore Pines. I'm Jake Rivers, 35. A remote software developer specializing in digital fraud investigation. I chose this place for the peace and natural beauty, ideal conditions for focused work away from the noise of the city. The cabin I bought was modest, a 2-bedroom retreat with a fireplace and a deck facing the lake. Everything seemed perfect, until I unknowingly stepped into the territory of Linda Morrison. Linda, 47, had declared herself the queen of this hoe. Technically, she was the president, but in practice, she ruled over the neighborhood like a petty dictator. She'd been managing the community for 4 years, though I use that term loosely. Before that, she was an accountant, one who'd been quietly dismissed for reasons no one liked to discuss. It turns out, she had been slowly siphoning money in small, hard-to-trace amounts. But more on that later. Linda saw new residents like me as threats to her carefully guarded power. She had a master key to the Ho building and firmly believed it was her duty to uphold community standards, which, in reality, translated to excessive interference and intimidation toward anyone who didn't fit her mold. Now, I'm a pretty chill, by-the-book kind of guy. I value my peace, so I made sure to follow every Ho regulation precisely. One of their winter rules required residents to notify them at least 24 hours in advance before staying overnight during the colder months, mostly due to heating system and pipe safety concerns. Fair enough. So every time I planned to stay at the cabin, I'd send an email through the Ho system. I'd always get a confirmation receipt back, a simple, automatic, no fuss. I assumed I was the kind of tenant they'd be happy to have. I couldn't have been more wrong, especially with someone like Linda holding the reins. On one particular Friday in November, I arrived at the cabin, laptop and groceries in tow, ready to work through a looming deadline. The setting was peaceful, a cold air, fog drifting over the lake, everything still and serene. At exactly 6 p.m., I did what I always did. I sent in my email to the Ho. Jake Rivers here, staying for the weekend. Heating's all set. Thanks. Within minutes, I received the usual confirmation. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I settled in, lit a fire, ordered a pizza, and got to work. The fire's gentle crackle, the rhythmic sounds of the lake, and the quiet of the night made it the perfect coding environment. I was deep in problem-solving mode, unraveling a tough programming challenge, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Unbeknownst to me, Linda was on one of her self-declared security walks, a nightly ritual she treated like a sacred duty. At exactly 10 p.m., she'd patrol the community like some wannabe sheriff, scouring for infractions. When she saw lights in my cabin and smoke from the chimney, she didn't bother knocking or calling. Instead, she jumped straight to the assumption that I was breaking the rules. According to notes we later uncovered, she believed I was just another newcomer trying to defy the system. And that's where her behavior took a sharp turn into the deeply disturbing. At 11:30 p.m., Linda used her unauthorized admin access to enter the Ho office. She logged into the system, pulled up my email, and after a moment of hesitation deleted it. Then, to cover her tracks, she emptied the trash folder. This was all caught on security footage. Even more chilling, in her handwritten notes, she justified the deletion with a single line: "He needs to learn respect for authority." But she wasn't done. 15 minutes later, she picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her report, that an unknown individual had unlawfully entered a vacant property. She claimed, as the Ho president, that the cabin was unoccupied and the man inside had no authorization to be there. She made me sound like a dangerous squatter. Meanwhile, I was sitting by the fire, sipping hot chocolate, knee-deep in server Kodia, completely oblivious to what she'd just set in motion. By the time I heard that pounding on the door, I had no idea I was about to come face to face with the consequences of Linda Morrison's scheme. The sharp knock sliced through the still night like an alarm bell. My first thought wasn't fear, it was concern. Maybe something bad had happened to a neighbor, a fire, a medical crisis. I quickly hit save on my laptop, set my coffee down, and made my way to the front door, still in my cozy pajamas. I opened the door with urgency. "Officers, is everything all right? Did something happen nearby?" I asked, genuinely worried as I looked beyond them for flashing lights or any signs of trouble. One of the officers, serious and professional, looked me over and said, "Sir, we received a report of unauthorized entry. Can you provide identification and documentation proving you have the right to be here?" It took me a second to fully grasp what he just said. Unauthorized entry? I live here. But I didn't push back. I knew they were just doing their job based on the information they were given. I nodded calmly and gathered my ID, property deed, mortgage documents, utility bills, and everything that clearly showed I was the legal owner of the cabin. The officer then mentioned the report claimed I didn't have HOA approval to be on the property. I frowned and explained that I had submitted the required notification earlier that evening, just like I always do. I even pulled up my phone and showed them the screenshots of the email and the automated confirmation from the HOA system. That's when she appeared. From across the street, Linda Morrison began making her theatrical approach, watching like she'd been perched on a stakeout the whole time. She walked up with the energy of someone who believed she had just rescued the entire neighborhood from danger. "Officers, thank you for your quick response," she said with a flourish, basking in a moment she had clearly been anticipating. It was the first time I'd seen her in person. We'd exchanged emails before, but never met face to face. She was a graying woman in a thick winter coat, her posture rigid with self-importance. I tried to remain courteous despite the absurdity of the situation. "Oh, you must be Linda," I said politely. "We've emailed before. Real nice to finally meet." She gave me a thin, tight-lipped smile before launching into her statement. "Mr. Rivers, the HOA has received no such notification from you. As far as I'm concerned, this stay is unauthorized." Her voice was confident, smug even, like she'd rehearsed this speech in the mirror. But I held out my phone, showing the time-stamped confirmation email I had received just hours earlier. "That's odd, because I do have the confirmation right here," I replied calmly. "Sent at 6 p.m., confirmed by your system." The officers, clearly trying to understand what was going on, asked if she could show them the HOA system from her phone. She handed it over without hesitation and, just like she wanted, there was no trace of my email. Her satisfaction was written all over her face. "See? No proper notification, no authorization. The rules are there for a reason." But I was watching her closely now. Her eyes, her timing, the subtle flex of her jaw, something was off. Her confidence felt too practiced, too timed. It didn't sit right. "Funny how emails can just vanish sometimes, huh?" I said casually, not taking my eyes off her. That's when I noticed the first crack in her armor. Her smirk faltered ever so slightly. She muttered something about a technical glitch and shrugged, but the shift in her body language told me everything I needed to know. The officers, now confident that I was indeed the rightful homeowner, began wrapping up. "Well, he's got documentation and proof of ownership. No crime here," one of them said, ready to leave. But Linda couldn't let it end there. With a final puff of righteous indignation, she added, "Next time, please follow proper protocol, Mr. Rivers. We take community rules very seriously." As she turned and walked away, likely believing she'd reasserted her dominance, I spoke up quietly to the officer, just loud enough for her to hear. "You know, officer, I work in digital forensics. Even deleted emails leave logs on servers. Might be worth investigating this. A technical issue." That was the moment her entire posture changed. She kept walking, pretending not to hear, but her back stiffened, her stride faltered. She realized she had picked the absolute wrong person to mess with. Why would she go so far as to delete that email? And what else had she been hiding? The next morning, Linda kicked into high gear, trying to rewrite the narrative. She sent a mass email to the neighborhood, carefully worded to cast me as a dangerous outsider who had put the community at risk. Security incident resolved due to swift HOA action. Unauthorized occupancy was handled last night. A reminder to all residents: follow official procedures to maintain our neighborhood standards. She didn't stop there. On the community's social page, she posted a photo of the police cars outside my cabin. The caption read, "Your whole leadership remains vigilant to protect your property values and community well-being." To my dismay, neighbors began chiming in with praise. "Thank you, Linda. And we're lucky to have you." It was clear she had cultivated a loyal following who saw her as a guardian of order. What they didn't realize was that their so-called protector was actually the biggest threat among them. Linda had mastered the art of appearing as the victim while playing the aggressor, positioning herself as the defender of values while bullying anyone who didn't conform to her control. Come Monday morning, she upped the ante again. I found an official-looking paper taped to my door, styled like some kind of legal summons. Violation notice: A unauthorized overnight occupancy, $500 fine payable within 10 days. It didn't stop there. She had added an itemized list of penalties with ridiculous precision. Failure to follow heating notification protocol, a $300. And then came my personal favorite, a broken bar. Then I noticed the final line item on Linda's invoice: disturbance of community peace, police involvement, a Macron $200, added to the earlier bogus charges. The grand total came to an even $1,000. Beneath that, a bold warning threatened repeat violations may result in removal from the community and legal action. In other words, she was trying to extort $1,000 from me for the crime of sleeping in my own home after following the rules. Her audacity said a lot about her mindset. Linda honestly believed her power had no limits and that anyone who challenged her would pay the price. Testing Linda's story, I sent her a short, polite text. "Hi Linda. There must be some confusion. I have proof I sent the proper notice." Her reply came back almost instantly, colder than lake ice. "The HOA system shows no record. Fines remain as issued. Payment due on schedule." I probed a little deeper. "Would you mind checking the server logs? Emails don't just disappear. I work in tech and can help if you're having issues." Her response dripped with arrogance. "I don't need technical advice from residents. I've managed these systems for years without problems." That was all the confirmation I needed. She was doubling down instead of seeking a solution. She had no idea she just challenged someone who specializes in uncovering digital footprints. Connecting the dots with neighbors, I began quietly asking around. First up was my next-door neighbor, Tom. While we collected our mail, "Tom, ever had trouble with the whole losing your paperwork?" I asked. He rolled his eyes. "Don't get me started." Linda rejected my pool permit 3 times. Said I'd missed steps, even though I'd followed every instruction. My confirmation emails gone. Thought I was losing it. Across the street, Sarah Mitchell told an almost identical tale. Linda had slapped her family with an $800 fine over their kid's driveway basketball hoop, even though Sarah had an email from Linda proving it months earlier. Then Mikey Macron Torres shared his saga. 2 solid years of pushback on solar panel permits. "She swears the approval never happened, but I have every receipt," he said, exhausted. A pattern was emerging. Legitimate emails vanished, Linda claimed non-compliance, and hefty fines followed. Digging into the servers, leveraging my forensic tech background, I took a closer look at the HOA's mail setup using publicly available data and standard network analysis tools. What I found was damning. The system created detailed backup logs automatically, a feature Linda clearly overlooked. Those logs showed dozens of messages had been deleted by hand, always during Linda's nightly security walks. 47 resident emails had disappeared over the past year and a half, and every resident on that list had later faced fines, harassment, or even moved out. This was no accident. It was a calculated scheme, setting a trap to cement my evidence. I sent a fresh overnight stay notification for the coming weekend, but this time with layers of backup, HOA screenshots of the sent message and confirmation, a blind carbon copy to my personal email, timestamps and metadata logged in multiple places. I also baited Linda with a courteous follow-up. Hi Linda, I want to be sure I comply perfectly. Could you outline the exact notification steps so there's no confusion? Her reply was priceless for an investigator. Any winter overnight stay requires my personal approval at least 48 Macron hours in advance. The automated system alone is insufficient. All notices must be reviewed by me, as HOA president. That email established 3 critical facts. She claimed sole oversight. She dismissed the official system she was supposed to rely on. She set a rule that didn't exist in the bylaws. When I pressed her to confirm, she personally reviewed and retained every notice. She dug herself an even deeper broken bar. Absolutely right. Nothing happens in this community without my knowledge or approval. I personally review every message to ensure compliance with our standards. I screenshotted her words, archived the entire thread in several secure locations, and noted every timestamp. That single sentence locked her in. She could never later plead ignorance or blame technical glitches. Gathering more victims' stories to strengthen the case, I contacted families who'd quietly left Lakeshore in Macron Pines. The Martinez family agreed to a video chat, and their story was both heartbreaking and enraging. Linda turned our life into misery, Mr. Macron Martinez said. She'd verbally approve things in meetings, then deny them on paper, fine after fine until we finally moved. The Ahmad family's experience was even worse, veering into blatant discrimination. She called the police on us 6 times in 3 months, Mrs. Macron Ahmad said. Every time we produced permits and confirmations, she insisted they were invalid. The decisive weekend test on Friday afternoon at precisely 2:47 Macron p.m. I sent another overnight stay notice. As before, I logged screenshots, metadata, and blind copied everything to external accounts. By Saturday dawn, the message had vanished from the HOA inbox exactly as expected. At 8 Macron a.m., Linda phoned, feigning authority but betraying a tremor of nerves. Mr. Macron Rivers, you're in violation again. No notice was received. This time I was ready. I texted back, Linda, I have timestamped proof the email was sent yesterday at 2:47 Macron p.m. Her answer came quickly and incriminated her further. The HOA received nothing. Your technical excuses won't work. I replied with a clincher. Interesting, my logs show a manual deletion at 11:23 Macron p.m. Last night from the admin account. She went radio silent for 3 full hours. When a response finally came, the anxiety seeped through the screen. I don't appreciate false accusations against my professional integrity. Linda's preemptive strike panicked. She called an emergency home meeting for Tuesday night. The mass email she sent to residents was pure melodrama. Critical community safety meeting. Immediate action required to address ongoing violations and disruptive behavior. The lone agenda item: removal proceedings for resident Jake Rivers. 15 people were apparently enough, in Linda's mind, to banish me. She had no clue she'd just set the stage for her own undoing. Showtime Tuesday evening. Linda treated the clubhouse like a courtroom. She arrived half an hour early, wheeled in a projector, and laid out a 20-slide PowerPoint titled Community Safety Standards Enforcement. Handouts labeled Pattern of Violations. Macron Jake Rivers sat at every seat. She even invited a friendly county deputy observer. Chairs were arranged so she sat like at the head table, while my seat, deliberately isolated, awaited in the back corner. As neighbors filtered in, Linda worked the crowd like a campaigner, whispering, to Mrs. Macron Patterson, I hate doing this, but some people think the rules don't apply to them. To Toma Macron Wilson, I remember the trouble you had. This is the same kind of disregard. She was cementing alliances before I ever spoke. I strolled in with just a laptop and a bottle of water. Linda eyed me, planning to disrupt our meeting. Mr. Macron Rivers? She asked, dripping disdain. I smiled. Just here to listen and learn, Linda. The prosecution begins. She opened with dramatic flair. Friends and neighbors, our community values are under attack. Certain individuals believe they're above the standards that keep our property values strong. Up went a slide of the police cars outside my cabin. This, she intoned, is what happens when procedures are ignored. Next came bullet points: unauthorized overnight stays, repeated notification failures, risk to community safety and property values. Slide by slide, she built her theatrical case. What she didn't realize was that every minute she spoke, she drew the noose of documented lies tighter around her own neck. A broken bar risk due to my so-called disregard for community rules. Linda's tone was grave, her pacing intentional. She had rehearsed every word. The slideshow was a parade of exaggerated claims and cherry-picked evidence, all meant to paint me as a reckless rule-breaker endangering the entire neighborhood. She leaned heavily on fear tactics, pointing to rising insurance premiums and suggesting that my actions could cause property devaluation. It was clear she was trying to stir panic and unite the room against me before I could speak. Then she paused dramatically, turned toward me, and said, "Mr. Rivers, would you care to address these concerns?" I stood, calmly walked to the front of the room with my laptop, and connected it to the projector. "Thanks, Linda," I said evenly. "I think it's only fair I get to respond to the accusations." The room was silent except for the subtle click of my laptop as I opened a folder labeled HOA Evidence. My first slide displayed a timeline color-coded and cleanly organized, showing every email I'd sent, with timestamps, automated receipts, and metadata. Gasps spread through the room when I flipped to the second slide, a screen recording showing the exact moment my latest notification email was sent and confirmed by the system. "And here's where it gets interesting," I continued, clicking to a screen grab from the HOA email server logs, publicly accessible for those who know where to look. This log shows that my message was manually deleted at 11:23 p.m. the night it was sent from the HOA admin account. All eyes turned to Linda, whose confident Section 8 was beginning to crack. "Linda," I said, turning to her, "just 2 days ago, you told me that nothing happens in this community without your review, that you personally inspect every message." I clicked to a screenshot of her email confirming that statement. "If you're the only one reviewing messages, and the messages are being deleted, who else could be responsible?" Linda's face flushed crimson. She stammered something about system errors and miscommunications, but the damage was already done. I wasn't finished. "I also reached out to former residents who were fined or pushed out after being told their approvals had vanished. And guess what? Their emails were deleted the same way, at the same times, during Linda's nightly so-called patrols." I played brief video clips of those interviews. The Martinez family, the Amats, the Taurasa, each one sharing their own story of harassment, backed by email records and documentation. Linda tried to object, but the crowd had turned. Tom Wilson stood up and asked, "Is this why my pool application kept disappearing?" Mrs. Patterson looked stunned. "And my complaint about sidewalk repairs was never received either." A broken bar, a quiet murmur swept through the room. The sheriff's deputy, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "Miss Morrison, I think we need to talk." Linda's entire strategy had unraveled in minutes. The projector, the handouts, the accusations that they'd all been turned against her, exposed as part of a coordinated effort to control the community through manipulation, deceit, and digital cover-ups. I closed my laptop, returned to my seat, and took a sip from my water bottle. The meeting wasn't just over, it was transformed. Linda had staged the night to be my downfall, but instead, it marked the beginning of hers. Linda's grand finale came with a dire warning. Allowing my actions to go unpunished would set a dangerous precedent, one that threatened the very order of the community. She presented her final evidence slide, a screenshot of the HOA's email system, conspicuously lacking any record of my notifications. The implication was clear: if there was no record, then I must have never sent them. With dramatic flair, she concluded, "Mr. Rivers insists he follows proper notification procedures, but our official system shows nothing. That leaves us with only two possibilities: either our reliable, professional system is somehow faulty, a broken bar, or Mr. Rivers is lying." She stepped forward, her tone thick with self-righteousness. "I've maintained this system flawlessly for 4 years without a single technical issue. Systems don't make mistakes, people do." Then came the hammer drop, her protection measures, laid out like sentencing guidelines from a courtroom. a $5,000 fine for what she described as a clear pattern of violations, immediate probationary status with mandatory monthly compliance reviews, and the kicker, continued infractions would trigger formal removal proceedings. Her final words dripped with finality: "We cannot and will not let one individual compromise everything we've worked so hard to preserve." The room stirred exactly as she'd hoped. Some neighbors nodded, clearly swayed. Mrs. Patterson even spoke up in firm support. "We can't afford chaos in a peaceful neighborhood like this." But others, Tom Wilson, Sarah Mitchell, looked visibly unsettled by the sheer intensity and overreach of Linda's punishments. The vibe was shifting. Then it was my turn. I stood up slowly, walked to the front of the room, and connected my laptop to the projector, each step deliberate, quieting the murmurs. "Thank you, Linda, for that thorough and broken bar theatrical presentation," I began calmly. "And thanks to all of you for taking the time to come tonight." Linda's absolutely right about one thing: a technology doesn't lie. I clicked to my first slide, my email outbox. There on display were crystal clear timestamps, recipient details, and automated confirmation replies. "Linda claimed with certainty that I never sent any notifications," I said. "Here's one from last Friday, sent at 2:47 p.m. And here I pointed to the next slide. A is the system's automatic confirmation of receipt." A ripple of whispers moved across the room. "Wait, he did send I a broken bar. There's the confirmation, a broken bar next." I pulled up something Linda never expected me to have: audit logs from her own system. Linda mentioned this is a professional-grade email platform. She's right, a professional systems log everything. Here's what those logs show. My email was received at 2:47 my broken bar and then manually deleted at exactly 11:23 p.m. I paused for emphasis, letting the implication sink in. Then I turned toward Linda. "Tell me, Linda, what were you doing in the office at 11:23 p.m. last Friday?" Her face flushed. She scrambled to respond, stammering, "Those logs could be fake. Anyone with basic tech knowledge can fake that stuff." I nodded, staying calm. "You're right. In theory, someone with the right skills could fake logs, which is why I brought something else." I clicked to the next slide and the room collectively leaned forward. "Let's look at security footage from the HOA office last Friday night." High-definition video played across the screen. There was Linda, entering the building with her master key at 11:18 p.m. The camera caught her checking over her shoulder as she sat down at the terminal. At 11:23 p.m., she began typing, then clicked delete. A few minutes later, at 11:27 p.m., she emptied the trash folder, stood, locked the door, and left. Every action, every second, perfectly timestamped. Her expression as she hit delete, smug satisfaction. The room went absolutely still. 10 seconds of silence so complete, it felt like a vacuum. Then the explosion, shocked gasps, voices overlapping. "Oh my God, she really did eat a broken bar. She set him up. This is insane." Linda floundered, trying to pull herself together. "Yeah, I was just clearing out spam. I thought it was junk mail." I turned to her and asked, "You're saying that an official notification from a homeowner regarding their own property was spam that you had to delete out broken bar at midnight?" There was no saving face. Then came the final blow. This wasn't a one-off mistake. I ran a full investigation. 47 emails say yes. 47 have been manually deleted over the past 18 months. A broken bar. The screen shifted to a complete list of names and dates neatly organized. The Martinez family, the Ahmad family, Tom Wilson, the Torres family, and many others. All of them had sent legitimate notifications. All of them had their messages manually erased by Linda. And every deletion happened during her so-called evening patrols. The reaction from the room was immediate and explosive, like a dam finally bursting under years of pressure. Tom Wilson shot to his feet, fury written across his face. "So that's why my pool permit kept getting denied." She deleted the approval emails. Sarah Mitchell's voice rang out, trembling with anger. "Our $800 fine for the basketball hoop. She told us we never asked for approval, but we did." She lied. The room erupted in overlapping voices, people shouting over one another. How many families moved because of this? This is fraud, a systematic fraud. We trusted her. In a matter of minutes, The tide turned. Linda was no longer seen as the vigilant steward of community order. She was exposed as its manipulative enforcer, a tyrant who had bullied, fined, and driven out residents who dared to step out of line. In a last, desperate attempt to salvage power, Linda stood up and launched one final defense, pitiful and paranoid in its tone. "You're all being manipulated by outsiders," she shouted. "He's not who he says he is, a hacker, a saboteur, probably working for a developer trying to buy up our neighborhood. This whole thing's a setup." That's when I decided to play my final card at the truth that would unravel her remaining supporters and vindicate every resident she had harmed. Linda wanted to know who I really was. Fair question. I took a breath, stepped forward, and let the tension in the room settle. Every pair of eyes locked on me. "My name is Jake Rivers," I said clearly. "I work for Digital Forensic Solutions, a private investigation firm. We specialize in online fraud, digital evidence recovery, and cyber harassment cases. And for the past 3 months, I've been living here under assignment working your case, Linda." The effect was immediate and complete. Linda froze mid-breath, her jaw slackened, color drained from her face as if someone had pulled the life from her with a switch. She stumbled backward into her chair, wide-eyed and speechless. The room, however, erupted into hushed but excited whispers. "He's a professional investigator, a broken bar. No wonder he caught here, a broken bar. She's in serious trouble, a broken bar." I spoke slowly, deliberately, ensuring every word carried weight. "We received multiple complaints about HOA abuse in this very neighborhood, detailed accounts of residents being fined and harassed, documents mysteriously disappearing, and repeated manipulation of communication systems. I moved in to investigate, document, and build a case." Then I turned to Linda. "And thanks to your performance tonight, I have everything I need to proceed with formal charges." A spontaneous standing ovation surged through the room, dozens of people rising, clapping, cheering, shouting for her immediate removal. Even longtime supporters like Mrs. Patterson turned on her. "You lied to us, Linda," she said bitterly. "You lied for years, and people suffered." What came next was inevitable. Linda snapped. "This is illegal. This is entrapment. You can't just spy on people like this. I'll sue every last one of you." She turned to leave in a rage, but I calmly interjected one final detail that made her stop in her tracks. "Oh, and Linda, you might want to take a hard look at your personal finances. Tomorrow morning, we begin a full audit of the HOA's accounts and expenditures." Her body visibly stiffened. She turned pale. That single sentence had struck deeper than anything else. It confirmed what I already suspected. The worst was still hidden in the books. What would that audit uncover? How deep did Linda's corruption go? For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Had my undercover approach crossed a line? I called my supervisor and laid everything out. The backlash, the privacy concerns, the questions about ethics. His advice was short but steady. "Stick to the evidence, Jake. The truth wins." That reminder grounded me. I replayed the faces of every family Linda had bullied out of their homes, every dollar she'd siphoned from HOA dues, every sleepless night she'd caused. I knew I had to finish what I'd started. Former residents speak up. The turning point came when Tom Wilson received a surprise call from the Martinez family, now living 3 states away. "We heard what's happening," Mrs. Macron Martinez said. "Linda ruined our peace. We still have the letters, the fake invoices, the voicemails. We were scared no one would believe USA until now." Their courage opened the floodgates. One by one, ex-residents offered documentation, threatening notes, doctored statements, even recordings of Linda's intimidations. At last, the stories that had been whispered in fear were coming into the open. Following the money armed with a warrant, I turned the HOA's books over to a specialist in association fraud. What she uncovered was staggering. $12,000 in administrative expenses with no receipts, invoices for work that never happened, personal purchases slipped onto HOA credit lines, kickbacks from friendly contractors. Linda hadn't just abused power, she'd converted it into a personal ATM. Her filing cabinets read like a playbook for psychological warfare. Target profiles, stress timelines, even notes ranking which homeowners would cave quickly and which might resist. Scrawled in her handwriting were chilling mantras. make compliance impossible, increase pressure weekly, force exit through exhaustion. She kept boilerplate email templates ready to unleash at each stage of her campaigns. The community summit: we booked the community center for a public reveal. The turnout was standing room only. Former neighbors joined by video from across the country. Martinez family, 18 months of fines and threats until we sold at a loss just to get away. Ahmad family, 6 police visits in 3 months because we grilled kebabs in our own backyard. Johnson family, she fined us $2,000 for adding a wheelchair ramp for my mother. Everything was permitted, but she called it unauthorized. Then came the recording that finished any lingering support for Linda. Her phone call to the sheriff reporting suspicious Middle Eastern activity at the Ahmad family's barbecue, framed as potential terrorism. The audio proved racial profiling and false reporting, adding possible federal civil rights violations to her rap sheet. Even Linda's most loyal defenders sat in stunned silence. The predator's mask had finally fallen and no one would ever see her as the protector again. When the full recording played aloud for the room to hear, the impact was immediate. Mrs. Patterson, one of Linda's staunchest defenders through countless controversies, turned to her with visible disgust. "Linda," she said, her voice shaking, "I stood by you through everything. How could you lie to us all this time?" Tom Wilson added with genuine regret, "So many families left because of what you did, and we failed them by not seeing it sooner." The vote to remove Linda from all HOA leadership roles passed unanimously. The motion to pursue full legal action for embezzlement and harassment passed 22-1, with Linda being the only one to vote against it. Her final appearance before the community she once ruled was nothing short of tragic. She stood trembling, lashing out in desperation. "You're all being manipulated. He's a government spy. I protected this community for years. Property values stayed stable under me. I sacrificed everything for you," I calmly explained. "Linda, I don't work for the government. This was a private investigation. You're not fighting a conspiracy. You're finally facing the consequences of your own choices." The reality hit her like a gut punch. Her bravado vanished. She sank into her chair, deflated and defeated. Justice delivered. The legal fallout came quickly and decisively. Criminal charges for embezzlement, harassment, and filing false police reports. Civil suits from former residents seeking restitution for emotional and financial damages. HOA insurance cancelled due to criminal activity and fraud. Her assets frozen pending court proceedings. Social consequences followed suit. Linda became a pariah overnight. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. Parents told their children not to go near her home. Even her longtime allies refused to speak to her. Within 48 hours, a moving truck pulled up to her house. She tried to sneak out at 5:30 a.m., but everyone was watching through their blinds. No one offered to help. As she dragged her last box to the truck, she spotted me across the street and stormed over. "Are you happy now?" she hissed. "You ruined my life." I met her gaze. "You did that to yourself, Linda. I just made sure the truth came to light." A community rebuilt. The transformation that followed was nothing short of inspiring. We restructured the HOA from the ground up. Strict term limits for board members. Quarterly financial audits made public to all residents. Transparent governance with recorded meetings and accessible documentation. A strong anti-harassment policy with real consequences. I chose to stay. The community voted me in as an honorary board member to help implement new digital transparency systems. Linda's old house, it sold at a heavy discount and was bought by a warm, welcoming young family with twin toddlers. They brought joy, openness, and true community spirit, everything Linda never had. Peace at last. 6 months later, I sat on my dock with a cold beer in hand, laptop on my lap, and the sound of children playing where Linda once patrolled like a paranoid watchdog. The sun was setting over the lake in a perfect orange blaze when a text popped up from my supervisor. "Great work on the case. Ready for your next assignment." I looked out over the peaceful neighborhood and smiled. "Think I've earned a little vacation." Final thoughts. So, what's the real lesson here? Sometimes the biggest threats to a community aren't loud or obvious. They hide behind titles like protector or leader. Linda portrayed herself as a guardian of order, but in reality, she was its greatest danger. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about accountability. When power is abused, and good people are pushed out or silenced, Someone has to step in, and not with vengeance, but with facts and evidence. That's why, when Linda tried to call the cops on me for sleeping in my own house, she panicked the moment she realized who I really was, because she knew, deep down, she had finally been caught. So, if you're facing a similar situation in your own HOA or community, document everything: screenshots, emails, dates, times. You never know when the truth might save not just your sanity, but your whole neighborhood. Now it's your turn. What's the wildest abuse of authority you've ever seen? Drop it in the comments below.